Hey guys, what's going on? This is Ed from vinylalbumcovers.com. Welcome back to the front. And you know what you won't hear? When I introduce Dre to you, you won't hear him say anything. He'll just sit there and laugh and see he's already doing it. I just didn't want to disappoint you. If you were looking for him to say something to you, why be disappointed? I thought I should just let you know that he's just not going to say anything. But that's Dre. So we're gonna so we were kind of bouncing some topics around, and Dre came up with our topic for this one. So I'm actually going to go ahead and shut up and let Dre introduce it.
Yeah, this was kind of inadvertently. I saw somebody had posted on Facebook. They're making a Milli Vanilli biopic, and I sent it over to Ed, and I was like, nobody asked for this. But then Ed was like, you know what? That's what our next topic should be. And at first I thought he was joking, but he was really serious though. And then the more we got talking about Milli Vanilli, we kind of thought, you know what, this actually would make a very good topic. Their run at the top was very brief. Like lightning in the bottle, kind of came and went like a current. But in that brief year or so, a lot of stuff happened, and we're going to discuss that today.
Yeah, because as soon as you brought it up, and I knew that you weren't thinking in terms of doing a show about it, but I thought, because I'm a little bit older, and I remembered so clearly what was happening. I thought, if they're gonna make a movie out of this, and Fab is involved, so it's not like they've actually got him involved as a consultant and a writer, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be good. But I mean, there are very few stories that you can take from real life and not need to employ some kind of poetic license for the sake of the story. Yeah. This is one of those where you just don't need to do that.
Yeah, it really does write itself. I mean,
it does.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something that you'd see in a movie that was, written just for a movie, but this stuff actually did happen. So
yeah, it's like truth is almost stranger than fiction here.
Yeah.
And it already has its own beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that your idea was so fascinating. And we were talking about it even just before we started recording. Like, can we do that? Can we even do this? And then the more we talked, the more we realized we really can do this.
Yeah.
So we're really going to do this. But in order to do this, in order to do it justice, and Dre and I talked a little bit about this at first too, we can't start just at Milli Vanilli. The story of Milli Vanilli really begins with a producer named Franz Ruther, who went by the name Frank Farian. This whole thing really starts with him and an idea that he had. So in order to get going with this story, like really get going with it, we have to go back to 1974. Like, I was almost one at this point, and Dre was not yet a concept. We got to be real about it.
Yeah.
But there was this, I guess the best way to describe it would be like a Euro disco band called Boney M. I think it was, if not the first, one of the first Frank Farian productions. There would be a few afterwards, and then we'd get to Milli Vanilli, and I'm not aware that there's been anything since. But at any rate, so he had this idea, and he wanted to record and kind of do like a solo thing. And so he wanted a name for it, and so he decided to call it Boney M. And he released this song called "Baby Do You Want to Bump," which is as terrible as the title sounds. And Frank did all the leads on it. He's the lead vocalist, and so the pseudonym for it was Boney M. And so he puts the song out, and it starts to take off in a way that he hadn't anticipated. And he goes, "Oh crap, this needs a face on it. This has to have, I'm not going out on the road. I'm a producer, and I don't have the right look." Is this beginning to sound familiar, Dre?
I think, weren't they like a, now that I'm thinking about it, you kept saying the name. I actually do have a couple songs on my iPod. Boney M.
I'm sure you have to.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Rivers of Babylon, I think. And then there's another one. Yeah, there's another one.
He didn't, Dre didn't think he knew, but he knows. But see, I knew you. Well, you know everything. I'm not surprised that it would come to you. Yeah, River. That's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so he creates this group, and they are the face of this thing, and they just get up and do lip syncing to what Frank has already done. It
Yeah.
sounds vaguely familiar to you.
Yeah.
So this is where the whole thing comes from. And then they did, like, as Dre mentioned, they had Rivers of Babylon. They had Ra Ra Rasputin, which is just the funniest song I've ever heard. It's literally a biography of Rasputin. And then it's the most ridiculous thing ever. And
Yeah.
then there's Daddy Cool, and there's a bunch of others. And
Maya Baker.
yes, that's another one. You see, you know.
I didn't.
Stuff.
Okay, I'll say this though. I did not know that they were lip syncing though. I really didn't know. I had no backstory on them whatsoever. Now that you kept bringing it up, I knew the name. It kind of brought it back for me.
Yeah, yeah. And they even had like they even had kind of a similar issue with the original lead named Bobby Farrell.
Mm-hmm.
Geppetto wanted to sing.
Yeah.
Or Pinocchio really wanted to be able to sing. And Frank was like, well, you can't. You're not good at it. That's not in your skill set. Just entertain. And so he took off, and they got another guy. Anyway, the whole thing lasted until 1986, and then finally it just kind of imploded on itself, and Frank didn't want to do it anymore. And
Yeah.
so then we go a couple of years later. Now we're in Milli Vanilli territories. I had to talk about Boney M because that's where Frank develops the concept, figures out that it works,
Yeah.
and then decides to try it in a slightly different way. So he runs into these two guys named Rob and Fab, brothers of soul, as they're referred to on the album. And what? And then he runs into them in a disco, and they have a look. I mean, they're good-looking dudes.
Yeah.
You know? So we're not blind here.
Yeah.
And so he decides to call them into the studio, and never for 2 seconds does he consider using voices that wasn't even on the table.
That bad, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there's clips of bless Rob's heart. You know, I hate to speak ill of the dead, but there are clips of Rob singing, and clips of Rob singing specifically. He could never do it, and Fab just couldn't do it yet. He could eventually, but he just couldn't do it then.
Yeah.
So you couldn't do that, right? So then I'm talking too much. Why don't you take this part over? Because you know stuff too.
Well, it's like I said, they were signed. They created this whole look for them. Kind of like the male modeling agency. No, I'm joking. But they had this.
You're not. That's it.
They they had this look, a really good look, like you said. And we talked about this, prior to coming on about, another topic, but the presentation was really well done. The way they were presented, good stage presence. They had it all, except for obviously the voice. They couldn't sing at all. They were signed in, I want to say 1988 or 89, and they were signed to this contract where they were supposed to do like 10 songs a year or something along those lines. We were discussing this as well. They were somebody had kind of figured them out even before the whole thing kind of blew up in their face. There was a reporter. I can't think of her name. Do you know her name? I don't really recall her name.
Well, we gotta get before that though. We can't go there just yet. We can't give away the story yet.
Okay.
So the whole thing really starts with a studio group. Now, Frank has already done work with Brad Howell. Brad Howell was one of the real singers, and he'd already worked with John Davis in the past too. There's the other real singer. Brad was kind of like the real singer.
Mm-hmm.
And John was more kind of like the rap guy, that would do the talking. And then by the time you get to the singing, like, girl, it's true, that's Brad Howell. And they're coming up with great music, but the problem is Brad's like 45 at this point, and I think John's roughly the same age. Mm-hmm. There are pictures. I'll look. There's one now. A picture of Brad. You see him, don't you? Oh no, he's there. I'm sorry, I was looking the wrong way. But if you look at him, you notice he's kind of a chunky dude. glasses. He doesn't exactly have the look, the Jerry curl's a plus, but
Yeah.
not the way he was rocking it. Bless his heart. He's so talented, but it was just the wrong look, and he knew it. He was well aware.
Yeah.
And John knew it too. He just knew that he kind of aged out of pop music. But what they were doing sounded so good. Like it was working, and he knew he could push the music, but he needed to go back to the Boney M idea to make the whole thing work. He needed cute guys. And this is my fault for kind of getting the story bit out of order, but that's when he goes to the disco and he finds his Muppets. I mean, Rob and Fab, and decides to create Milli Vanilli around them. So he's got the music and he's got these two impossibly good looking guys. He had to put extensions in their head because their hair wasn't really long. That was a minor detail that had to be taken care of.
Yeah, obviously, that was.
Yeah, because that wasn't their hair. But this is how the whole package forms. Mm-hmm. So he's got the music there, and I should also add on top of that, Brad is also doing some writing. So a lot of the songs were not only sung by him, but they were also written by him as well. If you look on the album for Girl You Know It's True, if you look on some of the songs, anytime you see the name B Nail, that's
him. Oh, okay.
So he wrote he was writing those songs, and he's a very good keyboard player. So he was writing music and writing lyrics. So he was also writing some of that stuff. So it's very, very interesting just how deeply involved Brad was in this. And they were both, Brad and John and the other two young ladies they were using were all very willing participants, because they knew, as we said, they knew that they had aged out of pop music. They knew that what they were creating could be successful if it had the right face on it. So they were, please understand, Rob and Fab were not necessarily totally on board with it, but the people behind the scenes were. They knew what was happening and they were okay with it. In fact, they wanted it.
Yeah. And what are you gonna do when you're however old they are, early 20s, late teens, whatever, and you got these group of guys trying to push this on you, and it's like, well, I mean, you're gonna become famous and you're gonna become millionaires. I mean, so there's a lot of pressure on you not to say no, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, they were plucked, the two of them, Rob and Fab were plucked from virtual obscurity. They were nothing, and they both had dreams of being bigger than they were. And this was the way to do it. And just as you intimated, Frank threw money at them, lots of it, in order to get them to take it. Man, I don't know. I mean, and you said it yourself, better than I can. I mean, if I were in that position and I was that age in my early 20s, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know that I would have said no. It seems like the classless thing, but would you really say no?
It is, but it's at the same time, it's like I don't know what their situation was beforehand or what their money situation was, but it's a lot of pressure though. You kind of know in your heart that it's not the right thing to do because you're not doing any of the work. You're not writing any of the songs. Right. But when you got producers and even the people that are actually singing the songs giving you the green light, you're kind of like, well, I mean, they're offering us X amount of dollars to do this, and I'm guessing they thought they weren't going to get caught, we just see Boney M, they did it, they got away with it, or, kind of.
The whole time they got away with it.
And a lot of that was probably due to, this is the pre-MTV era and all that stuff, so that's probably why they were able to kind of pull it off, I'm thinking.
Because all there was back then was Music Lot and
right.
They weren't on the Gray Whistle Test, but I mean shows like that.
Yeah,
there was absolutely no social media, of course.
Yeah,
there was no, the U.S. press wasn't checking for Boney M because they weren't successful here.
Exactly.
Ironically, they were signed to exactly the same record label. It's just that the U.S. arm didn't really get involved like that.
Yeah,
they were kind of an import success.
Yeah.
Whereas, Milli Vanilli wasn't quite that. And to be clear, I've said to be clear a lot, but to be clear, Frank and Brad and John, they were all, Brad and John did not meet Rob and Fab.
They never met.
They were kept, no, because the music, that was a separate department. So the music was created away from them.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Okay.
And they were presented these are the songs you're doing. You're doing these. So go learn these. This is what it is. They were not we should be clear, just for accuracy's sake, that it wasn't like they were in cahoots. They weren't part of it, but they also didn't say no to it. Like
Right.
Brad and John and the other two young ladies that were involved.
I'm sure they were nicely compensated. I'm thinking.
Oh yeah. Oh well, yeah. I mean, never mind the publishing. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
just the publishing from the songs that Brad was writing. Is hopefully that deal was somewhat fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they got paid for it, and they got to hear their voices on the radio.
Yeah.
That's not a terrible deal, and they already knew. Like I said, they knew the look wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So they had to get Robin Fab to stand in to be the look for it, to
Yeah.
be kind of the package. So they knew that there really was no choice.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing starts to take off. I mean, they did a
Mhm.
cover. They did "Girl, You Know It's True," which is a cover song. That's not the original of it. The original was done by the group was called New Marks,
Okay. Who was in
and
there?
they did it in 1987. The songwriters were in the group. So New Marks. So they were a group based out of Baltimore, Maryland. And all the songwriters that wrote that song made up the group. So we're talking Bill Petaway, Kevin Lyles, a name I'm sure you've heard. He's a label exec now. DJ Spen, Cool Rod, Kai Adeyemo. They were all members of the group, and they all kind of came together and wrote that song and put it out in 1987. And it made some noise locally, but it wasn't a huge deal until Milli Vanilli got a hold of it a couple of years later.
I actually never knew this, actually.
Yeah, I wasn't. I mean, I knew that there was that group, but I'd forgotten kind of. I knew they were from Maryland somewhere, but I just couldn't remember where. I didn't have the details, but now we have them, and you do too. Isn't that nice? So now we know that much. So they've got that song together, and then basically all they had to do was just learn a bunch of things. Learn them well enough to lip sync them. And so the song hits the radio, and much to everybody's shock and surprise, it starts to take off, and then they start to get the attention of Arista Records, which is something Boney M could never do. They got the attention of an American record label, Clive Davis's Arista Records, and they get signed over here. Mileage varies and stories differ as to how much Arista knew about what was actually going on. Some of the label execs say they knew nothing. Some of them say they knew everything. It just depends on who you ask. We don't know what the truth is.
I kind of tend to think that they knew something was going on, because I just don't know how, as a record exec, you wouldn't know that they knew something.
I would agree with you. I would absolutely agree with you. So in November of 1988, they put out an album called All or Nothing, which exists on the Hansa record label, which is BMG, the German record label that Frank put everything out on. And that album is the precursor to Girl, You Know It's True. It's like the German version of the record that we got. In fact, what's really funny is that they ended up doing a version of Ma Baker, which shows up on the album.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that hilarious?
That is.
They did a cover of Boney M. That's just great. But there's a bunch of other nonsense you don't care about that made the record. Some Baby Don't Forget My Number is, by the way, the one that Brad Howell wrote. I forgot. It wasn't Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You, but it's Brad Howell. Anyway, it was Baby Don't Forget My Number. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah, so they've got this record out there, and it's kind of starting to take off, and it gets the attention of Arista Records. And they're like, we like this idea. It sounds great, but we want our own version of it because this record won't sell in the US. And so they put together a completely new version of Girl, You Know It's True, a completely new version of that record with less songs on it. Now we're down to 10 songs, complete with a New York Subway extended mix of Girl, You Know It's True, because we needed that in our lives, apparently. And then and so that record comes out like a year later. Who knows? And then they've added, I'm looking at this now, but I do remember it. They added It's Your Thing, the Isley Brothers tune. They
Yeah,
had
I
it
remember
there.
that. Yep.
It's good because Brad can legitimately sing, so it's
Yeah.
good. It works. I mean, it's a little Euro disco, but it does work. Of course, it's got "Girl, You Know It's True" on it. It's got "Baby Don't Forget My Number," "More Than You'll Ever Know," which I never heard. They called in Diane Warren and got "Blame It on the Rain," which was a smart move.
Blame it on. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. "Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You," etc., etc. We know the tunes, but
Weren't
there's a
they like
lot.
already? Weren't they already touring like in Europe, like in Spain and Italy and places like that before they
Yeah.
ever signed?
Yeah.
They made a lot of buzz in Europe.
It was really working. That's how Arista got involved, and they just needed to have. They wanted an American version of that album, which was
Yeah.
very, very common back then.
Yeah.
Not so common now. Generally, I think the last group that did that was Backstreet Boys.
Oh, okay.
They had their album. We got Backstreet Boys here in Germany. They got Backstreet's Back, which is a bit of a different version of the record with different
Okay.
songs like that. So that was kind of the end of that, as far as I know. But they took a whole bunch of stuff away from All or Nothing
Yeah.
in order to create that album, because it had "Boy in the Tree," which is a disaster, "Can You Feel My Love," which is really terrible, bad Euro disco nonsense that wasn't going to work in America.
Yeah.
They took all that stuff off and brought in Diane Warren, and the rest is history, that we get the "Girl, You Know It's True" record that we know. So then they get over here and they go on the road, of course, because you got to take the whole thing on the road, and they have the band and they have their tapes, and they start to take things on the road. Everything's going just fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The videos are coming out. "Girl, You Know It's True" came out as a video and it did extremely well. It went straight to #1, of course, as we know. And then "Baby Don't Forget My Number" came out, that did exactly the same thing. It was this success, this huge success that nobody saw coming.
Yeah.
And then it was right around this time that they did
Their first
the
public
Club
appearance
MTV
in Connecticut.